Hi students, in this video I'm going to talk about the early North American tribes. Gradually we start to see the family groups that have established themselves as hunter-gatherers and then as more sedentary societies, establish themselves into larger groups, larger bands, and then into tribes. Generally, tribes are in some way biologically connected to one another, but more significantly, they typically have the same language, the same religious practices. We have records that typically these tribes have a chief, but the observations of those who came in contact with these tribes and with these chiefs noted that the power of these chiefs was not absolute. They were not some sort of absolute ruler whose word was law. They governed much more by persuasion than they did by power. And so now I'm just going to go through the different societies in the different regions of the modern-day United States. In the Southwest, we have the Hopi and Zuni peoples who establish dwellings on the sides of cliffs, who establish what are called pit houses, pits dug in the ground, then covered with a roof. This is the way they deal with living in the more arid Southwest, where there's fewer materials for building houses. They also develop means of agriculture. They establish trade with Mexican societies. Nevertheless, we see this culture, the Southwest culture known as Chaco culture, decline after about 1130 AD. There's a period of extended drought, which is very damaging to these cultures and these civilizations, and they're also having more and more difficulty with enemy tribes who are more nomadic, raider tribes like the Apache and the Navajo, who are attacking their settlements. So we see the culture of the Southwest, this Chaco culture, enter into a period of decline around 1130. In two other areas in the Northwest and in the Great Plains, we see less of a development of agriculture. And this is partly because the areas that these tribes inhabit are more fertile. We find that tribes in the Northwest are able to sustain themselves very comfortably through fishing and hunting in these very fertile areas of the region. We also find that Indians living in the Great Plains are able to sustain themselves through hunting buffalo, mixed with some agriculture, but they're less dependent on agriculture than tribes in the Southwest, in the Mississippi Valley, or in the East. And so now we come to the Mississippian cultures, which are based or centered in the Mississippi Valley, beginning, and this period is generally we tend to say this period begins around 900, extends to about 1300. And it's a period where you start to see Native American groups establishing large, expansive networks that are connected through trade that's carried out on the rivers. And the center of this trading network, this large trading network, is the city of Cahokia, which is near the modern-day city of St. Louis. So it's right around where the Mississippi and the Missouri rivers meet. It's a great place for a trading hub. Also, you have the Illinois River there. And this city, at its height, had a population of around 20,000 people. This culture, this Mississippian culture, is characterized today by the presence of mounds that were built for burial, as the site of temples, and as the site of houses for protection. And so this is a flourishing society that's producing a large number of artifacts, including pottery that we still have today. In particular, tobacco pipes and the smoking of tobacco is characteristic of this society. And we start to see this society begin to decline around 1250. So it's around 1250 that there's a period where global temperatures cool. And so we don't have a lot of, or really any written records from this society. So we're just kind of trying to piece things together. But it seems as though perhaps the cooling of the planet that's taking place the second half of the 13th century after 1250 means that agriculture becomes more difficult in these societies, and it means that this trading network starts to break down and to become fragmented. The last group of Native Americans that we come to are those tribes that are living in the east. First, in the northeast, we have the Algonquians, who are a tribe that's focused more on hunting. And then a little further to the south, beginning in upstate New York and extending down through to the modern state of Georgia, we have the Iroquois tribes. So both of these groups, Algonquians and Iroquois, are made up of a number of different tribes, but they speak a common language, which is why they're grouped together. The Iroquois tribes are more warlike. It's more typical for them to wage war than the Algonquian tribes. But the Iroquois, because they live further to the south, more temperate climates, are more successful in establishing a system of agriculture. And it's a very interesting system of mixed agriculture, in which different crops are grown together to support one another. Initially, European settlers thought there had been no system of agriculture in these regions and that the Neolithic Revolution hadn't happened. But that's actually because the Iroquois were growing beans and corn and squash together in the same field, recognizing that having different crops in the same field provided nutritional benefits for all three crops. Nutritional and cultivational benefits. And then the last group that I wanted to mention, just very briefly, the Woodland Tribes are tribes like the Creek, Choctaw, Seminole tribes that live in the south along the Gulf of Mexico. So there's your introduction to the different major North American tribal groups as we come towards the end of the Pre-Columbian period. What's interesting is that when we look at Pre-Columbian America, we can see amazing achievement, but we can also see in the years leading up to 1500, this society, this civilization, this region is approaching a point where it is going to be very receptive to change, or when change is going to take place very naturally. All of these societies are kind of moving to a point where some sort of change is going to happen. Now, the arrival of the Europeans is a huge, and for many of these peoples, a catastrophic change. But part of the reason why this change happens is that there are conditions in Pre-Columbian America that make it very conducive to this change. We talked about fragmentation in the Southwest, we talked about the fragmentation of Mississippian cultures, we talked about the oppressive nature of the Aztec Empire. All of these reasons, all of these factors will contribute to the success of European settlement in North America, North and Central America. And I'll talk about that a little bit in the next video.